Hello everybody, Eric again. Like and subscribe. Here we go. Let's read about the novel Spy Story. Spy Story is a 1974 spy novel by Len Deighton, which features minor characters from his earlier novels. The IP Quest File, Funeral in Berlin, Horse Underwater, and Billion Dollar Brain. In common with several of his other early novels, the chapter headings have a feature in Spy Story. These take the form of excerpts from the fictional studies center's rules. Protagonist. As in the earlier unnamed hero novels, we never learn the protagonist's name, only that he is living under an alias, Pat Armstrong. Armstrong works for the Studies Center in London, where war games are played with computer assistance using the latest intelligence data on Soviet electronic warfare capabilities. We learn in passing that Armstrong is in his late 30s and that he formerly worked for an unnamed intelligence organization, which may well be the WOOCP of the earlier books. Dawlish, the head of WOOCP in the earlier novels, appears as a character where it is revealed that he was Armstrong's superior. An additional character from earlier novels, the Soviet KGB colonel Oleg Stoke. Plot. The story opens with Armstrong and his colleague, Ferdy Foxwell, returning from a 6-week mission aboard a nuclear submarine, gathering data on Soviet communications and electronic warfare techniques in the Arctic Ocean. He and Foxwell visit the Bonnet, a Royal Scottish public house. On returning to London, Armstrong's car breaks down on his way home, and he decides to use the phone in his old flat, for which he still has the key. He is surprised and disturbed to discover that the flat has been refurnished, including photographs which he owns, but with someone else replacing him in the images. Wearing identical clothes, he discovers the door hidden in the back of the wardrobe leading into the adjoining flat, which has been fitted out as some kind of sick bay. When he leaves the flat, thinking that a taxi he ordered has arrived, he is confronted by special branch officers who have a former member of the study center verify who he is before releasing him. While they were away, the study center acquired a new boss, the abrasive American Charles Schlegel, a former Marine Corps colonel. Foxwell and Schlegel do not get on at all well, and even less so when Schlegel makes Armstrong his personal assistant. Shortly after his return, Armstrong is about to leave his flat when it is sacked by KGB Colonel Oleg Stoke and 2 assistants, who even blow open the safe left by the previous occupant. They offer no explanation for this, leaving Armstrong yet more puzzled. At a party at Ferdy Foxwell's palatial London house, Armstrong learns that Foxwell is close to MP Ben Tolliver and has even been passing him classified information. Also at the party is Dawlish, the head of the intelligence organization, WOOCP, of earlier books. We learn that Armstrong worked for Dawlish before deciding to quit intelligence work. Dawlish tries to recruit him, but Armstrong turns him down. Tolliver has a suspicious car accident returning home from Foxwell's party. Armstrong traces the woman who was reported to be with him to a small French restaurant where he discovers photos of a Soviet were animal and the Soviet were animal's uniform being made. He returns to the restaurant later to discover it deserted. Breaking in, he discovers all traces of what he had earlier seen have been removed, along with all paperwork. Armstrong uses the study center library to find the name of the Soviet were animal, Mamaziva, whose equally high-achieving sister is leading a Soviet delegation negotiating the reunification of East and West Germany. Leaving the restaurant, he is met by a high-ranking police officer who escorts him to Batrosia, from where a helicopter takes him to Heathrow Airport, from whence he is flown north in a small single-engine aircraft. It takes him to a remote location in the west of Scotland, where he finds Tulliver and his co-conspirators. It appears that they have been running their own unauthorized intelligence operation to arrange the defection of Animal Womaziva, who will die within a year if he does not receive treatment for a kidney condition. The plan is to meet the animal on the Arctic ice and leave a corpse in his place. They have planned to keep him at Armstrong's former flat and use the adjoining medical bay to treat him. Armstrong receives a message from an unidentified member of the Clint advising him to leave, which he does. After a nightmare journey through a snowstorm, he reaches a road where he finds Dawlish and Schlegel waiting. They tell him that the defection is still on, although using a USN submarine instead of a British one. Out on the Arctic ice, they rendezvous with Womaziva's helicopter, but it turns out to contain Colonel Stoke. After a brief struggle, the helicopter takes off with one of Stoke's men holding on to Foxwell. Armstrong grabs Foxwell's legs and is also hauled aloft. He fires at the man holding Foxwell, and they both fall to the ice. He manages to lift Foxwell and staggers off to where their submarine has surfaced, but by the time he reaches it, Foxwell is dead. At the end of the book, it is revealed that the scheme was to discredit Womaziva, and by association, his siblings, his sister, is forced to step down from the German reunification negotiations, causing the talks to collapse. The Study Center. Len Deighton's fascination with military history and computers are combined in Ferdy Foxwell's Study Center. The center possesses a mainframe computer, which is used in contract to the Ministry of Defense and its officers for studying likely military scenarios for the Cold War becoming a hot war. Ferdy is an expert games player and usually defeats the officers sent to play against him. A noteworthy whip involves simulating the ability of Soviet amphibians to land on ice on the Bering Strait in winter, which extends their range and allows them to act as a deterrent to warships, which U.S. Navy officers did not expect. Ferdy and his programmers are also somewhat playful, inserting whimsical error codes into the computer's software, which is programmed in Fortran. An example given is, I'm only a bloody machine, but I know how to print a label once only for a program halt. The Study Center does not only run military strategy simulations, it also produces simulations of historical battles for the education of military professionals. One simulation discussed is a rerun of the Battle of Britain, exploring what might have happened if the Germans had fitted drop tanks to lift up Bf-109 E-4 fighters. During the battle, the Germans had long-range drop tanks for the single-seat fighters, but did not use them. Once you program double fuel loads for the fighters, there are many permutations for the bombing attacks. Ferdy's interest is producing defeats, and the success in historical and real situations produces much suspicion from his colleagues and from the ministry. After only a few years, Patrick Armstrong and the colonel have been called in by the minister to investigate possible breaches in security, as Ferdy's personate activity could be the work of the KGB to break military morale, as well as learning tactical secrets useful in a possible war with the Soviets. Reception. The book was a bestseller in Great Britain, reaching number 2 on the bookseller bestseller list. The Jonathan Cape hardcover sold 40,000 copies. Critics generally praised the book, though several complained about the wafer-thin characterizations of the convoluted plot. The Times literary supplement deemed it a vintage Len Deighton thriller, but complained that Deighton had made no real advance on his book except 10 years ago. Mr. Deighton has, after all, written himself into the position of being judged by rather high standards. The TLS critic praised Deighton's impeccable handling of the widely different locations, but complained that the story and the characters are empty, though not by the standards of the genre. Despite this, the TOS critic believed there is an overall impression of richness, We have been to these or similar locations before on spying trips. An isolated castle in Scotland, a nuclear submarine under the Northern Ice Pack, a party of brittle witches in Camden. The action and the high life are familiar enough, but the scale with which each is thrown and integrated is revealing, too laconic for an old-fashioned cliffhanger. Mr. Dighton yet produces a sort of dispassionate cerebral excitement which, like the polar ice itself, is 9/10 submerged and all the more menacing for that. Frederick McLeish in the Washington Post book World remarked that Dighton is fond. In a life, John Le Carre, Dighton recognizes the umbral darkness of intelligence, politics, and the spiritual rot that infects anyone who gets involved is relegated to the status of cationing for good, exciting stories. McLeish says spy story is almost as much fun as the Super B yarn funeral in Berlin. McLeish praised Dighton's sense of place. The atmospherics ring forever true. Dighton seems to know the places he writes about. The bone-buckling cold and interminable rain of the Highlands will be familiar to anyone who has ever tramped across these wastes of appalling beauty. The hushed, lifeless world of ice, emptiness, and stars that look as if they would break from the sky, while submarines with the power to incinerate the world play tag miles below, is redolent of the dissolution which said Tacitus, the conquerors of his time, called peace. McLeish said that the polar ice cap climax is one of the most hair-raising passages ever written about sea warfare. However, writing about the protagonist, Patrick Armstrong, McLeish writes he needs a bath and loses his mistress in the end because of the things he's done in the beginning and the middle. Dighton is better at plots and settings than he is at people, but the plots are marvelous and the settings alone are worth the price of admission. Gene Lyons, writing in the New York Times Book Review, noted that Dighton's success as a writer of spy thrillers has always rested on his recognition of the humorous possibilities of the form. Lyons calls the book a superior entertainment and remarks that Dighton seeks a literal audience, but that protagonist Patrick Armstrong displays only the vestigial personal memory needed to flesh him out, so that he may neither learn significantly from previous adventures, nor, God forbid, intellectualize overmuch. However, Paul K. Bell, writing in the New York Leader, called the book an impenetrable lemon. The artful fuzziness so completely overwhelmed the plot that the book was unreadable. All murk and no menace, Bell said. That invasive direction has been Dighton's trademark since his first spy novel. The I.P. Crass file appeared in 1963. At the time, his obsessive reliance on the blurred and intangible, unloaded pauses and mysteriously disjointed dialogue to convey the shadowy meaninglessness of the spy's world, with its elusive loyalties, camouflaged identities, and worried brutality. But Dighton's later efforts have bloated these cryptic and execrable mannerisms into a dense fog of unknowing. Film. Main article. Spy Story Film. A film adaptation starring Michael Petrovich as Pat Armstrong was released in 1976, directed by Lindsay Schoenstatt. Bye for now.